Yo, what's up guys? It's Noah here, and in today's video we're going to be taking a first look at the Week 3 NFL slate on DraftKings. We're going to go through each position, quarterback through tight end, kind of give a first look of this slate, just kind of skim through the position. Obviously guys, I am not going to talk about every single player on the slate. These are my first looks, so I'm just going to kind of go through what stands out to me looking at this slate on Tuesday morning. As always guys, we will build out a first look lineup too as we do go, just kind of talk through roster construction for this week, maybe some stacks that stand out, kind of build more of a cash game based lineup, but we will touch on some, tournament stacks that I have some interest in early on in the week. But before we do get started with the breakdown, as always, I would appreciate it if you guys would click that like button down below. If you are new to the channel here, make sure you click that subscribe button as well. And if you have not yet, be sure to check out the sponsor Prize Picks. Link down below in the description if you guys want to check out Prize Picks. They're more of a player prop based site. It's not necessarily like DraftKings or FanDuel where you're building out a lineup. You're taking the over or under on their player props. They have rushing yards, passing yards. They have everything you can imagine. If you guys do want to check out Prize Picks, be sure to do so. Link down below in the description. Or just use promo code NOAH when you sign up for Prize Picks. You'll get a 100% match on your first deposit up to $100. But yeah, guys, let's go ahead and take a first look at this Week 3 slate. We will start off at quarterback. So at the top here, you got Kyler Murray, 8,300, most expensive quarterback this week. To no surprise, Kyler Murray's been amazing so far this season. 34 and 38 DraftKings points through 2 games. Gets a matchup against Jacksonville that, I think is one that Murray should excel in. This Jacksonville-Arizona game coming in with a pretty high total, 52 total right now, which I believe is like 4th highest on the slate. Let's see here. Sort this by over-under. So, yeah, Arizona-Jacksonville coming in with the 4th highest total on the slate. So, yeah, Kyler Murray's in a good spot, 8,300. He's obviously in play if you're paying up at quarterback. Murray's probably not someone you're going to be able to fit in cash games, but I think for tournaments, definitely stacking up Kyler Murray with his receivers. I mean, that was a good stack to do in last week's slate. Like, if you had Kyler Murray stacked with Rondale Moore, you probably did pretty well, or even DeAndre Hopkins, you could have stacked him. But, yeah, Kyler Murray, if I'm paying up at quarterback, he's probably my favorite. Patrick Mahomes against the Chargers, can't go wrong there either. Another game with a really high total, 55.5 total in the Chiefs-Chargers game. Mahomes is in play. Lamar Jackson gets the Lions. I mean, Lamar Jackson should be able to feast against the Lions. We saw what Aaron Rodgers did to them Monday night. I don't think this Lions defense is going to be very good at all. They're probably going to have one of the worst defenses by the end of the season. So Lamar's in a good spot. Russell Wilson gets Minnesota. Another game with a high total. Right now, that game actually has the highest total on the slate at 56. So Seahawks-Vikings, game that's projected to be very high scoring. Really, all these top-tier quarterbacks are in play for me every single week, and this is no different. All these guys are viable. Even Josh Allen against Washington, you could go to at 7K. I think Josh Allen will probably be like the lowest owned of the top-tier quarterbacks, but he's obviously viable as well. But then these mid-tier options, this is where it seems like the quarterback pricing, the mid-range, has been really strong every week so far. I think that's the case once again this week. So you got like Justin Herbert, who was pretty popular last week in a good spot against the Cowboys. Kind of disappointed, only had 19 DK points, but there are some positives. He threw for 338 yards, just only 1 touchdown. I mean, 1 touchdown, I don't think that's really something we can expect again for Herbert in a game where the Chargers were expected to score, close to 30 points in a game that had like a 55, 56 total. It was very surprising to see the final score be what it was last week, 17-20. I don't think anyone was expecting that to be the final score. It was just really weird overall. 6,500 though for Herbert this week in another game that projects to be high scoring on the road against KC, where they are 6.5 point road dogs. I mean, they're going to have to throw this week. They're probably going to be playing from behind. I like Justin Herbert a lot at 6,500. Was very interested in him last week. Obviously, that didn't go well, but I think Herbert's a good mid-tier quarterback. I think he's the guy I like most in the mid-range right now. We can go ahead and plug him into our first look lineup. If we want to make some changes later on in the video, we can do that, but I definitely like Herbert, or going back to Herbert at 6,500. But like Matthew Stafford, he's been pretty good so far this season. Rams Bucks, another game with a high total, 55.5 total, or 55 total in the Rams Bucks game. So Matthew Stafford's in a pretty good spot this week, 6,400. You could obviously stack him up with Cooper Kupp, who's been great so far this season, or Robert Woods, who probably comes in a lot lower owned than Cooper Kupp. I still like Robert Woods a good amount. And we will talk about Tyler Higbee when we get to the tight end position. I have a lot of interest in most of Matthew Stafford's pass catchers, so that's automatically going to make me have some interest in Stafford in tournaments. 6,400, he's for sure in play for me. Kirk Cousins, if you're just trying to get exposure to a high total game, Kirk Cousins, 6,300, again, 56 total in that Seattle-Minnesota game. Ryan Tannehill, don't mind him at home against the Colts, especially if we see Derrick Henry become really popular this week. You know, Christian McCaffrey's not on the main slate. I think there's another top-tier running back that's not on the main slate. If I remember, like Zeke's not on the main slate because they play Monday night. Aaron Jones not on the main slate because they play Sunday night. So, yeah, Derrick Henry might be the most popular pay-up option at running back this week. If that's the case, obviously you could play Ryan Tannehill and stack him up with his pass catchers in tournaments as a way to get different. But value-wise at quarterback this week, value's not great. Like there wasn't much cheap that I liked at quarterback last week. I think that's kind of the same, or kind of same this week again. Do want to mention Daniel Jones, just because I think, you know, when we get to running back, we're going to talk about Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley is very affordable this week. It's a good matchup for Barkley. I think Saquon Barkley is going to be very popular. If that is the case, Daniel Jones automatically is not going to get much ownership. So in tournaments, if you want to fade what is likely going to be a popular Saquon Barkley, I think going to Daniel Jones in tournaments does make sense at 5,800. Like Jameis had a bad week last week. His price came way down, 5,600. Tough matchup, though, on the road against the Patriots. I'll probably be avoiding Jameis this week, but somewhat intriguing since his price tag did come down a little bit to 5,600. Matt Ryan, you know, I kind of was interested in him last week just for the fact that I thought, you know, Atlanta would be playing from behind. They were going to have to throw a ton, and that's exactly what happened. You know, Matt Ryan threw the ball 46 times, had 22 DK points. Not saying they're going to be behind a ton this week against the Giants, but 5,400 Matt Ryan, I think he's fine for value, but not too much I like down here. Justin Fields could maybe start this week. Andy Dalton could be banged up. He might not play. On the road against Cleveland, though, I don't think I'm going to play Justin Fields, even if he does wind up starting this week, but he does at least have some upside for, you know, because of his dual threat ability. But that really does it for quarterback. I think this mid-range, once again, is really strong. Justin Herbert, Matthew Stafford, even Kirk Cousins I have some interest in. Obviously, these top-tier guys are all in play as well. But Justin Herbert, probably my favorite quarterback right now, kind of early on in the week. Moving on to running back, though, talking about the top of this position. Again, no Christian McCaffrey on the main slate this week, so Derrick Henry is our most expensive running back. He's coming in at 8,600. Derrick Henry went absolutely nuclear last week. If you saw, 35 carries, 182 yards, 3 touchdowns. Also got 6 targets and 6 receptions. So this is a big positive for Derrick Henry. So far through 2 games, 4 targets, 6 targets. You know, if he's going to be a guy that consistently gets that kind of usage in the passing game, even just a few targets, that's going to make him a lot more appealing than normal. It's tough to roster Derrick Henry on DraftKings just because of, you know, just because of how little he's involved in the passing game. With DraftKings being full PPR scoring, I want running backs that can catch 4, 5, 6 balls. That really wasn't the case with Henry last year, but so far he has been a little bit more involved in the passing game. He is coming off a massive 50-point game, so I think Derrick Henry might be a little bit over-owned this week. I'm going to be very interested to see what ownership projections have between him and Dalvin Cook. I think Dalvin Cook is my preferred pay-up running back this week, especially without Christian McCaffrey. I think Dalvin Cook is the number 2 running back in fantasy behind McCaffrey. So any slate where Christian McCaffrey is not available, Dalvin Cook's automatically probably going to be my number 2 option. And I think that is the case this week. You know, good matchup here at home against Seattle. Good game environment, 56 total. I'm pretty sure Seattle has struggled a good amount so far against the run. Obviously, you know, a little bit is skewed because of last week's game against Derrick Henry, but they have allowed 275 rushing yards through 2 games against opposing running backs, and that's actually second highest in the league right now. Rushing touchdowns, they've allowed 3 rushing touchdowns to running backs, which is second highest in the league, or tied for second highest. Now, again, a lot of this is kind of skewed because Derrick Henry went nuclear against Seattle last week, but Dalvin Cook in a high-scoring game, 8,400. He's my favorite pay-up running back this week. I think I do prefer him over Derrick Henry. Let's go ahead and plug Dalvin Cook into our first look build. We can probably find some value to fit him in as we build out the lineup, but I do like Cook the most at the top. And then you have Alvin Kamara. Look, Alvin Kamara is super talented. It's a tough matchup on the road against the Patriots. I think Alvin Kamara will be very low owned this week. That automatically makes him appealing in tournaments, but to say he's a top play for me would just be a lie because I'm not that interested in Kamara. The only way I get exposure to Kamara is if I'm just looking for some leverage and I'm looking for some low-owned plays. Then I would look to Kamara. But yeah, Henry, Cook, definitely my favorite pay-up options at the running back position. Getting down to some of these like mid-tier guys though, Najee Harris was very, very popular last week. He was solid. Wasn't very efficient, but he did have 5 catches for 43 yards. He did get a receiving touchdown, so he was able to score 19 DK points. He did get the volume though. He played like close to 100% of the snaps once again. I'm gonna pull it up real quick. I'm pretty sure he played like all but a few snaps. He played, let's see. Yeah, so Najee Harris played 53 total snaps, which was 95%. So look, 100% of the snaps week 1, 95% of the snaps week 2. Najee Harris is going to be a workhorse running back. Should get probably 15 to 20 touches on a weekly basis. Good matchup here at home against the Bengals. 6,600, still very affordable. I like Najee Harris a lot in the mid-range. Saquon Barkley, as I mentioned, look, he was pretty much unowned in week 1 because everyone was concerned about his workload. Last week on that showdown slate, not a ton of people played him, but he did get 15 touches against Washington. The workload is slowly starting to increase for Saquon Barkley. I'm going to take a look at his snap count from last week because I'm pretty sure the snap count went way up. Yeah. So week 1, Saquon only played 48% of the snaps, but then week 2 in that Thursday night game against Washington, he played 84% of the snaps. So over 80% of the snaps last week, got 15 touches. Was not very efficient, but that was obviously a tough matchup against a good Washington defense. This is not a tough matchup. At home against the Falcons, I mean, the Falcons might have one of the worst defenses overall this season. The price tags come way down on Saquon Barkley to $6,500. I think Saquon's probably going to be a staple of your cash game lineups this week. I think in tournaments, if you want to fade him, you can. But I definitely like Saquon. The price tag's too low. He got back to playing over 80% of the snaps last week. He got 15 touches. We should expect him to play probably over 80% of the snaps this week and get 15 to 20 touches. And we know Saquon is still one of the more, talented running backs in the league. Now, there's some concerns with like his offensive line and, the Giants offense as a whole probably won't be very good this year, but good matchup against a bad defense. Price tags come down. Kind of all the boxes are checked for Saquon Barkley this week. So I do like him at 6,500. Him, Najee Harris, even like Chris Carson, Joe Mixon. Like, we got a lot of workhorse running backs in this mid-range. Kind of the same as last week. Last week, there was a lot of good mid-range running backs in the 6K range. I think that's the case once again this week. Harris, Carson, tough matchup for Mixon, but, he's been getting massive usage. 21, 33 touches, 6,300, still very affordable. David Montgomery, 6,100. Another guy that's going to get big-time volume, 17 and 23 touches through 2 games. Matchup's not that good against Cleveland, but he's a workhorse running back for only 6,100. But then coming down to like some of these 5K options, they're not too much down here I have interest in, but I do want to mention a couple guys. DeAndre Swift wasn't that great Monday night against Green Bay, but got 12 touches. He continued to get good usage in the passing game. At home against Baltimore, a game where the Lions will probably be playing from behind. We should expect DeAndre Swift to get 6-7 targets, 5,800, viable in tournaments. James Robinson, I think if you are going cheaper at running back, he's probably the guy that stands out most. He was not good at all week 1, only got 8 touches, but last week did get 14 touches. I think his snaps went way up as well. Let me check that. So James Robinson only played 64% of the snaps in week 1, but got up to 73% of the snaps in week 2. So the snap percentage went up, the touches went up. The matchup this week at home against Arizona, I would say, is pretty favorable. Should be a pretty high-scoring game. Like I said earlier, that game does have one of the higher totals on the slate. James Robinson, as a value running back, 5,700, I do have some interest in. Chase Edmonds got some ownership last week. He was pretty cheap. His price tags come up now. It's tough to roster Chase Edmonds now that he's 5,700. I guess if Josh Jacobs was out again, we can maybe play Kenyan Drake. His price also went up, though. He did get some good usage in the passing game last week, but still wasn't very efficient. Probably wouldn't go to Kenyan Drake, but at least would be viable if Josh Jacobs were to be out again. Mike Davis, maybe. He got 16 touches last week, got really good usage in the passing game. That was a tough matchup against a good Tampa Bay defense, especially a Tampa Bay defense that's really good against the run. This week, pretty easy matchup against the Giants for 5,100. Mike Davis could maybe be a value running back we consider, but that probably does it for running back. Leonard Fournette, I'm not really on. Look, he got 15 touches last week, but he's still having to split carries with Ronald Jones. You just never know which one of these Tampa Bay running backs is going to have the big game, if any of them do. I'm fine just kind of avoiding the Tampa Bay backfield for most of this season. I'm probably going to be doing that a large majority of the season. Not much interest in Fournette at 5K. Well, I'd rather play Mike Davis at 5,100. Or even, drop down to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the clear value at running back this week. If you are going cheap, look, he hasn't been good so far this season, but the workload's been there. He got 17 touches in week 1. He got 13 touches last week against Baltimore. I think he's been playing a good amount of the snaps as well. he hasn't really been a workhorse running back so far with the Chiefs. We haven't seen him get like 25 touches a game, which I think is what people were expecting. But he did play 72% of the snaps week 1, played 65% of the snaps in week 2. Obviously, last week he fumbled the ball to end the game. He kind of cost the Chiefs the game last week. I think the coaches might be a little bit upset with Clyde Edwards-Helaire right now. I think people, the community, the DFS community might be off of him, but $4,800 for Clyde Edwards-Helaire is way too cheap. I mean, this guy was literally $6,600 week 1. He was $6,700 last week, and now he's $4,800 this week. I mean, sign me up for Clyde Edwards-Helaire in what should be a very high-scoring game against the Chargers. The Chargers have also kind of struggled against the run this season. It's obviously only been 2 games, but they have allowed the most rushing yards to opposing running backs through 2 weeks. 287 yards allowed to opposing running backs, which does lead the league. So could be a decent matchup for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Look, he plays for probably the best offense in the league, an offense that we expect to score a ton of points every single week. The only issue I have with Clyde Edwards-Helaire is that he might not get the massive volume that we would hope, but again, he's only $4,800. I'm willing to just take a shot on him and hope that maybe if the Chiefs score 30 points this week, that maybe Clyde Edwards-Helaire finds the end zone at least once or twice. So $4,800, I like him for a value running back. I think we can plug him into our flex right now because normally, like if we're building out like a cash game lineup, normally in cash games you want to tend to play 3 running backs. That's usually the way I go, but it's all slate dependent. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a value running back definitely makes a lot of sense this week. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to wide receiver now, talk about the wide receiver position. So at the top here, a lot of these top tier receivers are going to be in play for tournaments every single week. Depending on who you're rostering at quarterback, you're going to have plenty of stacking options at the top here. Like in your Mahomes lineups, you could obviously stack him up with Tyreek Hill. In your Kyler Murray lineup, stack him up with DeAndre Hopkins. Your Josh Allen lineups, you can go with Steph Diggs. When it comes down to these top tier receivers, they're really all in play every single week. I would say for me, Tyreek Hill and DeAndre Hopkins are my 2 favorites. I know they're the most expensive, but I think those are the guys that just give you the most upside. But we can't overlook, like a Tyler Lockett. I mean, Tyler Lockett has been awesome so far this season. Now, Week 1 was a little bit fluky. He only got 5 targets. He had 4 catches for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns on 5 targets. So that was a little bit fluky. But last week he got massive volume, 11 targets, 8 catches, 178 yards, and a touchdown. Look, he's been great. I think between him or DK Metcalf, I usually just prefer whichever one's lower owned. I think Tyler Lockett's going to just be more popular than DK Metcalf because of how well he's done so far this season. So if I'm choosing a Seattle receiver, I do have more interest in DK Metcalf because I think he'll be lower owned. But both Lockett and Metcalf are definitely in play, especially in your Russell Wilson lineups. Same goes for like a Justin Jefferson. If you have any Kirk Cousins lineups, you probably want to try and get Justin Jefferson or even like an Adam Thielen in those lineups. But if I'm talking about the top tier receivers like 7K and above, I think Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins are my 2 favorites. Calvin Ridley, have some interest in him for sure at 7K, especially if I'm playing any Matt Ryan or maybe in some lineups where I have SAQUON Barkley, want to run it back with Calvin Ridley. I think that makes a lot of sense. Calvin Ridley hasn't really got off to that good of a start so far this season, but I think that's going to come back. He's going to start regressing positively at some point. He did get 10 targets last week, which was good to see. Had 7 catches, 63 yards. He did find the end zone. Pretty good matchup against the Giants. Terry McLaurin just dusted this team last week. The Giants, they do have some good corners. I know they have James Bradbury, who's been really good so far. At least, last year he was. He hasn't really been that good so far this season because he got burned by Terry McLaurin last week. But Ridley at 7K, for sure in play for me. Then the 6K range, a lot of good options here, man. Like Cooper Kupp, he's been great so far this year, getting massive volume, 6,800. Good matchup against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, if you're going to target Tampa Bay, you want to do it through the air and not against, on the ground. So I think it is a pretty decent matchup for these Rams receivers, the Rams pass catchers, I should say. Cooper Kupp at 6,800, I have some interest in. Keenan Allen, I was very high on last week, and obviously, a little bit disappointing, but he did at least get the 100-yard bonus. He did have 4 catches for 108 yards, 17 DK points. I was hoping that he would find the end zone maybe once or twice, but in the end, Keenan Allen still put up 17 DK points on a week where he didn't, score a touchdown. Back-to-back weeks now that we've gotten double-digit DK points from Keenan Allen without finding the end zone. At some point, we're going to get one of those games where Keenan Allen scores once, if not twice, and when he finally does that, he's going to put up 25, 30 DK points, and it could definitely happen this week against the Chiefs in a game that we expect the Chargers to be, forced to throw. The price tag came down a little bit on Keenan Allen. As we already mentioned, I have interest in Justin Herbert, especially since he kind of busted as chalk last week. Keenan Allen, I don't want to say he busted, but was disappointing as chalk last week. For 6,600, I like pairing him up with Justin Herbert and going right back to that quarterback receiver stack this week. So since we already have Herbert in our lineup, let's stack him up with Keenan Allen, who does feel a little bit too cheap this week at 6,600. He's probably one of my favorite mid-tier receivers, but there's a lot of guys here. Again, Cooper Kupp, Adam Thielen. You got the Tennessee receivers, Julio and A.J. Brown, both viable for sure. Even if you want to get a little bit different in tournaments, you got Mike Williams for 6,400. I definitely think Keenan Allen will be more popular than Mike Williams. So, if you want to get different, you could stack up Herbert and Mike Williams instead of Keenan Allen. The Tampa Bay receivers in what should be a high-scoring game against the Rams, you got Mike Evans at 6,300. You got Godwin at 6,100. Antonio Brown is super cheap. He's way down here at, I think, 5,200. 5,200. We are going to talk about him in a second. I think he could be someone we plug into our first look lineup. But then, Robert Woods, a lot of interest in Robert Woods, especially since he has been underperforming so far. We've seen Cooper Kupp put up massive games, back-to-back massive games. With that being the case, people are kind of off of Robert Woods right now. I don't think he gets much ownership this week. But again, this is projected to be a very high-scoring game against the Rams, or against the Bucks, excuse me. It's got the third highest total on the slate right now at 55. If people are going to just jam in Cooper Kupp, and look, I think Cooper Kupp's a good play this week, but I'm definitely have interest in Robert Woods, especially if people are kind of off of Robert Woods. We know Robert Woods can still put up big games. He still has plenty of upside. Matthew Stafford, I don't think he's going to really lock in on one guy every single week. I think he's going to spread the ball around. We should see 7, 8, 9 targets for Robert Woods, 5,700. Definitely have interest in him in this 5K range. And Antonio Brown, 5,200. Definitely like Antonio Brown this week. He's coming off a bad performance last week against Atlanta. Only got 3 targets, just 1 catch for 17 yards. But the price has come way down. The matchup this week, I think, is probably favorable for him. He should be. I think Antonio Brown mainly plays out of the slot with Tampa Bay, so he should be able to avoid most of Jalen Ramsey coverage, if I think that's correct. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think Brown does play mostly in the slot, so he should be able to avoid Jalen Ramsey. At 5,200, getting a very talented receiver that has big-time upside and what should be a high-scoring game. This is what I look for. I think, a guy like Antonio Brown, even in cash games, I think is viable this week. Robert Woods at 5,700, I like a lot as well. We'll plug in Antonio Brown for now. If we have the salary to get up to Robert Woods, we might go with Robert Woods instead. But I think Antonio Brown at 5,200 looks like a really good receiving option in this 5K range. Odell Beckham probably going to make his season debut this week. 5,300 for Odell Beckham without Jarvis Landry, who probably is going to be out this week. I think Landry's already been ruled out, or he's questionable, but I doubt Landry plays this week. So if we get Odell Beckham without Jarvis Landry, 5,300 for Odell Beckham. Got some interest in him for tournaments. But getting down to value at wide receiver, Rondale Moore had a big game last week, 8 targets, 7 catches, 114 yards, and a touchdown. He's been pretty involved so far through 2 weeks with the Cardinals. It seems like he's going to consistently be a guy that gets 5, 6, 7 targets a week. Playing with Kyler Murray, obviously there is upside for Rondale Moore. Definitely in play at 5K. Marvin Jones Jr., I think, is going to be the popular value option at wide receiver this week, but kind of for good reason. He's been targeted heavily through 2 games. 20 total targets through 2 games, 9 targets week 1, 11 last week. He's found the end zone in back-to-back games. It seems like him and Trevor Lawrence definitely have a connection. I'm pretty sure he actually leads the team in targets so far through 2 games. It seems like he's the guy that Trevor Lawrence is kind of looking to right now. But he played 91% of the snaps week 1, 88% week 2. He's been an every down receiver or close to it, getting close to double-digit targets. Good matchup this week against Arizona in what should be a high-scoring game, and what is a game where Jacksonville will likely be forced to throw once again. I like Marvin Jones Jr. for value at 4,900. He is definitely too cheap for the volume that he's getting right now, and especially in such a good game environment in what should be a high-scoring game. So he's a value receiver I have some interest in. There's some other guys you could go to down here. Not a great spot for Tyler Boyd against a good Pittsburgh defense, but I know Pittsburgh, you can beat them in the slot. That's kind of always been how they've been attacked. Receivers, it seems like slot receivers always do well against Pittsburgh. So Tyler Boyd, who mainly plays out of the slot, 4,700. Fine tournament option if you want to go there. Manny Sanders been getting decent volume, 8 targets, 6 targets through 2 games. Matchup against Washington's probably not ideal, but 4,200, super cheap for what we should expect in terms of volume. I think he's playable. McCole Hardman, if you're just looking to get some exposure to a high-scoring game for cheap, I mean, 3,900 for McCole Hardman. Obviously, we don't expect McCole Hardman to get a ton of volume, but he's a deep play threat. He could obviously break off a long touchdown. He should be very low owned. He gets you some exposure to what should be a high-scoring game between the Chiefs and the Chargers. Don't mind him as like a tournament option if you're stacking up that game. I think that makes some sense, but that probably does it for wide receiver. That kind of looks like most of the options, I would say. There could be some stuff that opens up as the week goes on, or maybe I skipped over some guys. Obviously, in my final look video that I record on Friday, we'll talk more about the position, but for now, we can go ahead and hit on tight end real quick before we end the video. So before we start with tight end, let's just plug in a 2K defense. Obviously, I'm not saying I'm going to play the Jaguars defense, but if we plug in a 2K defense, that leaves us enough to play basically any tight end 5K or below. So we should definitely be able to make this work. But like at the top of the position, you got Travis Kelce, Darren Waller. Obviously, these guys are both in play. If I'm choosing between Kelce or Waller, I definitely prefer Kelce. I just think the Chiefs' offense is way better. I think he has more upside than Darren Waller, but Darren Waller definitely in play. He should be a lot lower owned than Kelce. So if you want to get contrarian in tournaments, pay up for Darren Waller, tight end, I think that's fine. But tight end is normally a position where I'm trying to go cheap at. Normally, it's tough to pay up at the tight end position when you're trying to pay up for quarterbacks and running backs as well. So, if we're looking for value here, look, like Rob Gronkowski, I do want to mention him just because, look, I was off of him last week. I full faded him in tournaments. I didn't play him in any lineups, and it burned me. He scored 2 touchdowns once again, but it was a very fluky performance. I mean, he only had 5 targets, 4 catches for 39 yards, and it just so happened that 2 of his 4 catches were touchdowns. Look, if Gronk gets 5 targets this week and scores 2 touchdowns again, then so be it, but I'm fine just avoiding Gronk. His price tag is up. He's not going to catch 2 touchdowns every single week, so I'm off of Gronk. I wanted to mention that real quick. TJ Hawkinson, just volume. I mean, 11 targets week 1, 9 targets week 2. In a game where they're going to be trailing against Baltimore, we might see double-digit targets again for TJ Hawkinson, so volume alone makes him a playable option. Kyle Pitts, 4,900. He had a better game last week, 5 catches, 73 yards on 6 targets. If you're playing SAQUON Barkley, you want to run it back with Kyle Pitts. I think that makes some sense. So we could plug Kyle Pitts into this lineup. We could plug Noah Fant in this lineup. I have to mention Noah Fant. He continues to get solid volume on a weekly basis, 6 to 8 targets. His target share in the offense should definitely be a little bit higher now that Jerry Jeudy is out. So Noah Fant against the Jets, I have some interest in. Tyler HIGBEE, he was a popular play at tight end. Last week, he was kind of everyone's value pick, and obviously he did not do well. He busted, only 1 catch for 8 yards on 1 target, but I think he played every single snap once again last week. Let me check that. So HIGBEE played every single snap in week 1, and once again in week 2, he played every single snap. So he's going to be on the field for every single snap, it seems. The target should be there. I know he busted last week, but at 4K, I definitely like Tyler HIGBEE for value. I think we could plug him into this build. Obviously, we have enough if we want to go like Kyle Pitts or save some salary, play HIGBEE. We could play HIGBEE at 4K and then maybe upgrade up to Robert Woods or upgrade from Antonio Brown up to somebody else. So we would have enough to play. We'd have enough to play like Mike Evans or Chris Godwin. So we could do that. We could upgrade from AB up to one of those guys. We could upgrade from Marvin Jones up to one of these 6K receivers. Like maybe we could upgrade Marvin Jones to Robert Woods, or defense, we could obviously upgrade there. So it's kind of a lot of ways you could kind of tweak with this lineup. We'll just upgrade a defense for now because I do like this build right here. We'll upgrade it from the Jaguars defense. I doubt I'm going to play the Jaguars defense, but I just kind of wanted to plug them in to see what we had with salary. But when we do upgrade a defense, I mean, we could get the Saints against the Patriots. That's probably the team that I would take here. 3,100 against Mac Jones. The Saints defense has been pretty good so far this season. They can force turnovers. They should definitely be able to get some pressure on Mac Jones and force. He should probably force some turnovers against him, I should say. So that's kind of what I would look to for a first look lineup for this week, guys. More of a cash game based lineup, but we do have Herbert stacked with Keenan Allen, run back with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We got Marvin Jones, or we got Tyler HIGBEE, Antonio Brown kind of correlated together, and then we got Dalvin Cook one off, SAQUON Barkley one off, Marvin Jones one off, and then we got the Saints defense to round out our kind of first look lineup for this week. But yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I think we kind of took a quick look at every position, mainly quarterback through tight end. Hope you guys enjoyed though. Be sure to hit that like button before you do get out of here. Hit that subscribe button as well, and also be sure to check out the sponsor of this video, Prize Picks. Link down below in the description. PrizePicks, obviously, a little bit different than DraftKings than FanDuel. It's more of a player prop based site. But if you want to go check out PrizePicks and see what they have to offer, make sure to use promo code NOAH when you do sign up for PrizePicks, so that way you will get your first deposit matched up to $100. So if you sign up with my code, deposit $100, they will match that. They will give you an additional $100 to play with. So then you would have $200 that you could use to make whatever picks you want for either this week 2 or this week 3 main slate, or for like the Thursday night game or the Sunday night game, whatever it may be. But check out PrizePicks, guys, and be sure to use promo code NOAH when you do sign up there. But that does it for the video. Good luck this week, guys. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next one. Peace.